Hello, everybody. Welcome back. See if we can get some more stuff done today. Let me just check if everything is working here. Let's see if can you guys see my screen right now? All good? Perfect. All right. So today we're going to be doing some reprojection and talk about the planning of our base mesh, obviously, first. And I mean, like I'm gonna do this because I already have my base mesh set, which is basically the same base mesh I use for all my characters. It's not like a perfect base mesh at all. I mean, like you're gonna see there's a lot of wasted things. For example, like the ears, they're super heavy. You know, I can add more pores inside of a ear than I can do in the face, which is weird. But that thing about like, you know, always waiting and trying like, oh, okay, next time I'm gonna clean it up and do better, and then I never have the time to do it because of family stuff, you know. But one day I'm gonna clean up that mesh. But I can show you what I have right now, and then obviously you guys can always start like I said before, you know, it's like with that base mesh that I uploaded. That's kind of like a Z remesher, and I'm gonna give you a couple of tips as well on how to work with topology in ZBrush. I don't do like polygon by polygon in ZBrush. I rather do that with quad modeling in Maya. I have more precision to do that, so I can show you you know, a couple of ways to approach the topology. But I mean, like it's kind of like basic stuff, but just in case, you know, it's like you never know who is taking the classes. I normally ask like if you know, the people are more experienced, so I kind of like bypass that whole basic part. But just in case, you know, it's like just do a little recap about, you know, maybe you can get some trick here and there. So let me start by looking at, let's do something here first. I want to check with you guys. So this is what I have right now. I added a little bit of, you know, just a little sketch of the shoulders in there, and I stretch his neck so he looks a little funny right now. But this is basically, I actually saved here what I did. This was actually before the class. I just added that. So basically, like I had that yesterday. So what I did, I just like selected the lower part, and then I start stretching stuff right there with the selection. So I stretch it out, and then I start just like pulling it very roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect because this is going to be all projected. So, you know, it's like no worries about topology. This is just a sketch model. So that's basically what I have at this point. And then I also brought my base mesh, which is like every class I use another one, right? A different one. In this case here, I'm going to be using her because I reduced the amount of UDIMs as a test, and it actually worked out with I think I'm using just like 2 UDIMs for her, but they are 8Ks, so that means like 8 maps, right, total for everything, 8 4K maps. So we're going to be using her as the base mesh, and I'm going to project everything into this little guy here, right? So we're going to have at the end hopefully the same model, just with the nicer topology. Again, the topology is not great. I'm going to show you like the ears here. Look at the wasted, you know, it's like it's not pretty at all. This was kind of like repurposed many times, but for the face stuff, I think it's pretty okay. You know, it's like especially this area here. As you can tell around here, you're gonna see like, for example, like this area here, the size of the polygons, right? They're quite smaller than those ones. They're kind of like a 1/4 of the size. That means you can squeeze 4 times more, you know, detail around this area than you can in here. But since we're going to be cranking this all the way to about 72 million polygons for this chunk, we should be able to sculpt pores, not like super sharp or anything in this area. You're going to look a little bit blurry, but it's going to be good enough, you know. But in those areas here, for example, eyes and everything else, you're going to be able to add a ton of detail without a problem. That's why I say, you know, it's like if you plan your mesh a little bit better than this, you can get better results, you know, in terms of the sharpness of the detail. But like I said, you know, it's like even with those polygons being pretty big in here, you can still add a ton of detail in HD geometry. But definitely like avoid this kind of stuff, you know, it's like this wasted amount of polygons right there in the ear. You see, like I can add like, I don't know, like 10 times more detail in that spot in there than I can do in this whole face, right? So yeah, if you plan it correctly, then you can get like a much better flow. And you know, the main point here is to keep most of the topology in the face, right? You can get away with stuff going towards the side, right? Like, so for example, you don't need to have like a perfect topology with like perfect, like a huge amount of polygons around here, because it's kind of like a glancing angle, right? Like you're gonna have like some of the hair covering this part, some of the peach fuzz maybe around there. And normally like when you're gonna see something in focus, you're gonna be looking at the face mask basically. Like I call face mask something like this, right? The face mask in there. So that's gonna have to have like a decent topology. And then everything else, I mean, like if you're rendering stuff with depth of field, this stuff is gonna go out of focus anyway. But you know, if you plan it correctly, you can get perfect detail everywhere. You know, so this is the topology you're gonna be using. One thing before you start is that I asked that topology that the topology is perfect. You know, it's like in terms of symmetry, it has to be perfectly symmetrical. And ZBrush sometimes, I don't know if you ever noticed, if your model is slightly offset, a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, it creates a bunch of like artifacts. Sometimes it tries to interpret the center line in here and ends up like doing something that, you know, kind of like goes in and crosses. It has this kind of like weirdness that goes something like that, you know, it's like pinches in the middle. That's some weird stuff. So I'm going to show you here in Maya the way I do, just to make sure that everything is perfect. So this one is already corrected. So I already have everything in place. I'm going to just hide this one. Let's just re-import it from the original one, which is in my previous model here. Let's do here and then OBJ. So let's get her latest in low resolution. So you're going to notice right here that she's not symmetric, right? Like I had her posed like that, right? So one thing I can do first here, just to make sure, normally I do this part here in ZBrush and then I bring in here, but I can try to do it here. So I can actually select, let's do like a selection like this. And I'm just gonna do, let's try this. Yeah, let's do like a soft selection. Let's do it just with one. Let's do it like this first. Let's just do a very rough version of it. And then I'm gonna press insert just to be able to move the pivot in here. I'm gonna put the pivot slightly more towards the center in here. I'm just gonna rotate this thing back just so I have like a little bit more symmetric around there. Doesn't need to be perfect. And then I can start with that. Let's see from here, just in case if you have something that's, you know, completely asymmetrical like I have. You see, like I already messed up with a face in there. So something here is not like, it's not gonna be completely accurate, but let's see how it works. In your case, I mean, like you're probably gonna have some, look at her jaw in there. Yeah, it's a little bit sloppy, the work here. Let's get this back just slightly. Let's see, because I just wanna demonstrate like the resymmetry stuff here in Maya, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Let's just bring this back. Oops, what a mess. Right there. Let's get a little bit more to the side. And then just show you how to make the symmetry to look perfect here. Obviously, this is like a very exaggerated asymmetry in there. I just messed up with her chin. But the way it works is like this. By default in here, you're gonna have the symmetry off, right? But as long as you have your model completely symmetrical in terms of topology, you can actually fix that by doing this. So you click the model and you say symmetry based on topology, and then let me turn off my soft selection here. It's gonna basically bring this little, you know, it's like a way of visualizing just the edges in here. So basically like it's selecting by edge. So you're just gonna click in one edge right in the middle, and now everything is symmetrical. So if I try to select something, you're gonna see it's perfectly symmetrical, right? So now that you have that the symmetry set up, you can just go around here, and you get the way that works basically like to symmetrize your object is to select a couple of components. So if you try to do without anything selected, it doesn't do anything. But if you select a bunch of things, let's try just like in this area here first. And then let's say mesh, and then edit mesh, symmetrize, right? So the symmetry now is perfect around there. Same for this area here, if I do it. Obviously, it's gonna mess up this whole area here, but just for you to see it. So, you know, it's like it brings everything to perfectly symmetrical. Because sometimes, like I said, like if you have something in ZBrush, it gets very confused around the middle section, and then you don't get like a perfectly symmetrical model. So what I did with this model here, I actually brought this model with the pose and everything to ZBrush first, And then I did a soft selection in this area here just to rotate back the shoulders to a neutral position, right? And then when it was close enough, then I brought it here to Maya and I did the process and it actually worked very nicely, you know, if you do it carefully in there. So that's what I have right now. I have a model that's perfectly symmetrical in here. And you can test that by doing this. It's always good to test, by the way. You can pull like one shoulder, for example, and you can just go to your deformation and then smart resim, right? Oh, that's weird. That's weird. Why? Man, ZBrush sometimes. Oh my God. Yeah, I did this before and I saved the scene and now it's not working. But I'm not sure what's going on. It says like the model is not symmetric. It might be something during the export that Maya might have like, you know, maybe like stitch some points, but I don't think so. I think it should be good. I'm just gonna have to double check. Let me just do something here. Let me do, let's do something like a test. Let's just make sure that the model is still the same. So I'm gonna store this, the morph target, and I'm gonna bring that posed mesh back. I'm hoping it's just like ZBrush acting funny. So let's do this one here. And then let's see if I can actually do a morph between the two. Yeah, if it's morphing, that means everything is correct. But like I said, that's why I don't trust that symmetry thing, you know, because sometimes ZBrush does that kind of stuff. If I had this object here in a separate, brought as a fresh tool, I'm pretty sure it would not work. So for example, if I did something like here, let's see, if I brought it this way, and I just try to apply deformation and then smart resim, look at that, it would explode, right? Because it's not like, it doesn't have a center line that's like in a good spot. So that's why I do this stuff like in Maya and I bring it back and it normally works. But you know, like I said, I saved this before and it was working fine. I tried, you know, the same test, did a little resim in there and then it worked fine. But now it's not working. Look at that. So weird. Anyway, but I know the model is symmetrical because it's actually morphing to the original one. And I know that in Maya is completely symmetrical as well. So I'm gonna just ignore what ZBrush is doing here. And I'm gonna move on with it. So I have like, as a job, I have to transfer these forms that can be like from anything. It can be from a scan, from you know, from a Dynamesh model. In this case here, we started with the Sculptress, and then later on I transform into you know, did some topology work in there with Z-remesher, right? So let's pretend you don't have a base mesh at this point and you want to generate something using the Z-remeshing here. There are a bunch of different ways to do it. Like I said, you can do like a poly by poly model here in ZBrush, which should take some time. Or you can try to use the Z-remesher to help you out with the process. And I think like the best way I found to create that decent topology from the get-go is to select by groups. So I'm gonna just duplicate this. I'm gonna create a duplication there. And then you can select stuff like, for example, like around the eyes to force, for example, let's create a selection in here around those eyelids, fairly round like this. And then make sure that I capture that whole area right there. So if you do something like this, you can just say, you can go to your polygroups. You can do it a little bit lower res here just so it goes a little faster. You can just say polygroups, and you can do a group masked, right? So now if you switch in here, you're gonna see there's a different color, right? So you can keep doing this for the other areas as well. You can do like around the lips or the entire muzzle, for example. Let's see. It's a little bit harder sometimes when you have like a forced pose already. In this case, I already have a pose in there. But let's just see what ZBrush does with that. Let's just erase that. You do the same thing. You can go to your group mask, right? And then every time you create a different color in there, If you want to change the color, you can always do something like auto groups like that, right? Change the color. And then you can keep doing this in every single area you think you're gonna need some kind of like loop. And you can hide those things too. I mean, like you can hide those areas you already did and make sure that you just using the new ones. So for example, like to mask around this area here, do another group mask, you can hide it. You can get like, just like a loop for the ear, for example, something like that, you know. It's up to you, like how you're gonna plan your topology in there, how you wanna try to force ZBrush to create those loops for you. So if I do the ear in there, so I now have another one. So at the end, you're gonna have a bunch of different ones. You can do like for the neck, you know, it's like maybe like it's gonna be a good idea to actually force ZBrush to find some of those loops around the neck, maybe around the eyebrows in here, like the brow ridge, right? But the fact is, like once you have this in place, then you can go to your geometry and Z-remesher, and you can just say, okay, first you define you can attempt to have like a base mesh that's very low res, for example, like can start with 5K, right? Or more than that. And then you can actually say, in this case here, let's say freeze groups, keep groups, right? Let's try with keep groups first. And let's see what Z-remesher does. Make sure that's symmetrical. Let's try that. Let's see how long it's gonna take. Shouldn't be too long. Although I have 647,000, yeah, I should have gone a little bit lower than that, but shouldn't take too long. Oh, remeshing aborted. Man, things are not working very well today, huh? I don't know why I aborted. That's very bizarre. Hello.
I had this. Hello. I had this with ZBrush 2021 several times. It works with Legacy. I noticed.
Oh, really? Oh man. Let's try that. Let's try with the Legacy. I'm going a little bit lower res as well. Yeah, I mean, like I just updated this today. Look, it's 2021.1. So this is the latest. And
hey, Chris.
Hello.
Hey, just throwing in my 2 cents. I updated to 2021 today too. And was having so many problems. I had to switch back.
Oh man, Jesus! Now we know. So yeah, this is using the Legacy. The Legacy is not going to give you like great results at all. But let's pretend our ZBrush is working the way it should. You should be able to get like some nicer loops. You know, man, I normally trust that ZBrush is not gonna cause too much trouble. I'm more like skeptical about Maya. When I played Maya, you know, it's like right before I start those classes this August, I was like, man, I hope everything is okay. And I already noticed a couple of bugs in there. But anyway, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's behaving the way I would expect at this point. But let's try to do our Z wrap at least and make sure that things are working here. So this was basically like the beginning for the, another thing I can do, like a very quick demo here, because that way I'm pretty sure it's gonna work. Let's go back here to Sammy. Let's export this one with a fairly high res, so like 640,000 polys. Let's export this one. Man, thanks for telling me. I wish I knew before. I mean, like it sucks. Let's see, import. Let's get this guy right here, OBJ sketch 5. Okay, so the other way to do it, and that's my favorite way to do it because, you know, it's like it's the way I normally do at work as well, unless you have like some plugin to do things a little bit faster, which is great as well. But one thing that I do is this. Let's switch here, for example, to layers. So if I put this guy in a layer, click that little sphere in there. So I have a layer, now I can hide it, right? I can just do, for example, just click this little magnet in here, right? So this one now, it's basically like, it's live. So you can actually sculpt on top of it. You can add stuff on top. So if you click this little box in here with the little hammer, you have access to the multi-cut and quad draw. So the quad draw is pretty cool, because you can actually do it symmetry as well. I don't know if this one is going to work with symmetry here, but there is symmetry. Let's see in this live constraint options, relax, extend. I don't remember which one is that, but I remember doing it with symmetry. For now, let's just keep it off, and then let's do this. So for example, like if you just click a couple of times to create like one single square like that, you can keep doing this, creating those little squares like this. Then I'm gonna change the direction around there. And then you have option to actually press shift and just click right in the middle of it, and just, that's it, right? You click create one polygon, or you can click and drag. Oh, sometimes it does that as well. And then if you don't click right around the middle, it does that kind of stuff. But now, since it's live, you can keep like manipulating it and changing things like that. And I would say the best way is to start like very low poly first, and then add one subdivision level and then reproject everything, you know, otherwise it gets a little bit too heavy. So basically like this is a easy way to just like build a topology, and it shouldn't take too long if you do, like I said, like a, you know, it's like very broad, you know, polygons, instead of like something that you try to go like too high res from the get-go. But if you do something a little bit more broad like that, you can get stuff done quite fast, you know. And then anytime you need more, obviously, go create like something like that, keep going with it, you know, and then you can just fill up the gaps. So at the end, if you have something like this, you can just select the mesh, and you can either do, for example, like a mesh, let's see, like a smooth. So just add some smooth in there, right? And now you can make turn off the live, this one here. And then you can project things. You can project, you can do like a shrink wrap. You can do either here or in ZBrush, and then get everything to snap back to the surface. And then you get like a very nice match for it. So that's another way to do it. But in this case here, let's just pretend you guys have your topology all figured out at this point, either using the mesh that I provide, or with your own. That's probably much better than mine. And then let's pretend we have it. And then in that case, you are not going to have to do like this huge process here of reprojecting a completely different mesh into this mesh, right? You're probably going to have something that matches quite perfectly if you do this technique, just snapping and building a brand new mesh. But in my case, what I like to do, the reason why I reuse those meshes every time is because first, I don't need to go through this entire process, refigure it out, what the loops do and everything, because normally it works. And because I have this idea of like maybe one day doing like some kind of animation, like morphing all those characters, you know, it's like I have like so many different faces that I can morph because the topology is exactly the same. And also because I can reuse some of the maps. For example, there are certain maps that are so simple. For example, like the specular map is just like super simple, you know, it's like the bump height, you know, that I use like just for the micro displacement is quite simple as well. So a bunch of those maps I can just reuse straight away, you know, so I don't need to repaint them. I mean, before I started those classes, this was the whole project, you know, it was like my intention was to actually create something that was good enough that I could reuse, you know, so I can and iterate, like, and create new characters much faster. But then obviously with the classes, I have to go through the whole process and I have to redo a lot of stuff. So if I was doing this as a personal work, I would be much faster sculpting those characters because I would be reusing much more stuff. But in this case here, since we are painting brand new maps, at least like the albedo color and the displacement and all that stuff, I have to go through that process every time. But maybe if one day I stop like teaching the classes, I'm probably just going to be hacking it, you know, just like reusing a lot of stuff, which you guys can do, you know, it's like since you guys are not teaching. So let's do this. Let's just delete this guy here so he's not there, and hope that ZBrush is going to behave since you guys gave me the heads up about the problems. So the first thing I normally do, I try to conform the face to the other face. The best I can, not the best I can, the best I can would be like making a perfect match, right? But close enough, let's say. So I'm gonna get like a very broad brush. And I'm gonna drag stuff like that, just like get the eyes at least like close enough. I'm using like the Alt here, just like to bring stuff the direction of the camera, right? And the eyes now are quite close to the place we need. And then I'm just gonna get it back in here. This is kind of like we spent some time in preparation here, making sure that things are close enough so we don't have to redo a lot of stuff later. But every time I do this process here, it's never like it's like a straight away kind of thing. You have to be careful with certain things. But if you save a more target before you start, and you do some of this stuff using a mask before you go to Z wrap, then things start to look a little bit more easier to control, I would not try to do like straight away, especially considering like this model here has a cavity for the mouth. So there's a socket in there, right? And the eyes as well. And in his case here, everything is covered. So if I try to do that, it's going to create a giant mess in there. So I'm going to try to preserve that socket by not touching it. And then same thing is going to be with, it's like with certain other areas, like the inside of the eyes. Projection is always that thing that sucks, right? That when you try to project something that has holes in it. And that's the reason I try to keep my base mesh completely watertight, because I don't want to go through that trouble of having to resolve like those edges. And also because if you have a watertight mesh, if later on you want to try to 3D print it, it should be much easier to control as well, right? So right here, let's just bring this up. It's going to look a little funny for a while. Let me get the move by topology in here so I can actually get this area. I'm going to do like a very broad move in here because I want to make sure I get close enough to the surface of his lips. And I can even smooth this out a little bit in there, since I have a little color for reference. And then that's the whole trick in here is going to be transferring from a model that has an open mouth to a model that has the closed mouth, right? But with a little bit of work here, we can get that. And like I said, we can isolate the inside of the mouth. And then make sure that when we project, you reuse that socket, that pocket in there, but without too much trouble in here, But definitely, like, it's the kind of work you have to do a little bit carefully, otherwise it goes bad. But it's nothing that you cannot resolve by doing some more like manual projection, right? Just like a few, it's like you can use the project brush, for example, which can be tricky because it's based on the normals direction. And then sometimes you have to be very careful with it. But, or you can do like just like selectively, just use the project all in the small areas and go over the whole mesh. So the chin is going to be a tricky one because he has a very tiny one and she has a kind of like a little bit more proud in there. I'm just going to go all the way around here. I'm going to try to find his little chin around there. It doesn't need to be like perfect or anything. I mean, like the Z-Wrap does a beautiful job with this stuff. A lot of the stuff I'm doing here is kind of overkill. The most important part is to actually get see, I'm getting like the pocket in there. I think, let me see if I'm doing something already without seeing it. If you go to the display and click double, now I can see it. So the pocket's right there. So I'm gonna just bring it in like that, and then bring this out. I'm gonna keep it, and then I'm gonna just check how far in it is at this point. And I'm gonna make sure that's far enough that I can actually just isolate it and then work in the external part only. It's like just the outer area of the skin in here, and keep that pocket way locked in there. I'm just gonna smooth it out here, bring it out a little bit again. Something like that. I just want the surface to be close enough. So let's get this in a little bit. Let's see how this nose is behaving here too. Again, like this is the kind of stuff that Z-Wrap is probably gonna do a beautiful job with. I should not be too worried about, but just to make sure, that I'm not gonna screw up the whole thing. And also make sure that those polygons are not stretching in a funny way, because we need to, make sure that things are still well distributed. Let's do just as smooth in there. Okay, something like that. Let's try this. So the eye, let's see if the surface here is close enough. That's the main concern, it's like eyes and then the mouth. If you have those close enough to the edges, you're good. Let's get this one down around here. And then obviously, since we are doing a sketch, that's not like a final model or anything, there's still a lot of work to be done with the sculpting. So we can always keep working on it and do a little projection, just to make sure things are, the details are not being lost. But at the same time, we don't have a ton of details because yeah, it's just a sketch. So it's a perfect timing to start projecting things. So yeah, so that's basically like the eye edge in here. So I think we should be good. Now this area here sometimes can be tricky if you have a, if you're trying to transfer from one character to another that has already a fold in there. So I'm gonna just like smooth this fold out a little bit. Just make sure that it's not crossing inside or anything. Just like a little bit more neutral, not too pinched. And then let's see the ear here. One thing I normally do with the ear, if I already have a mesh that has a decent sculpt for the ear, sometimes I preserve the ear almost completely, and I just like carefully just like place it, and then kind of like mesh the sculpture, but without destroying everything that I have already in the mesh. But in this case here, let's just try to see if the reprojection is going to do a good job. And then if I have to resculpt anything, no problem. You know, that's what we're going to do. Let's just do this, get a little bit closer. Again, a lot here is overkill, guys. I'm just like trying to make sure that things are slightly in place, you know. And then let's switch here to the head. Let's increase the volume a little bit. And again, overkill. ZWrap can resolve this with no problem, especially at the bigger forms. Yeah, it's a little bit trickier for ZWrap to resolve like those tighter spots. But like for the bigger forms, you should get like everything done correctly. So let's do a couple of things here. The first, we're gonna save a morph target. And then the second, we're gonna do a selection and make sure that everything is being transferred based on the selection. Let's do this. And then let's see if shoulders as well, just a little bit closer. Actually, I'm not gonna bother too much with the shoulders. Let's leave it like that. Let's see how much of a good job he's gonna do. Now, if I hide him, it's gonna look very weird, right? Look at her. Now we have this, we have those sockets in there that I mentioned before, right? They have like inside of the mouth, inside of the eyes. And fortunately, I have them as polygroups. So when I did my selection there, I created polygroups for them. So I can just hide like this. And I can even, I'm gonna keep this one. Let's see if I keep it. No, I have to hide the inside here. And then I can just do a careful projection for that area. And let's do that for the caruncula as well. I'm gonna just remove it. Like that. And now I have those areas here. And then what we can do, oh, there's another little spot right there in the back of the throat and the back of the eye. So those guys need to be masked as well. So what I can do first, I can just like reverse the whole thing and then just click. You know, it's like I can, you know, could potentially, you know, do a little cleanup in this thing here right now, but not necessarily, right? It's not gonna be seen. But later on, I can actually use this area here, and knowing that I have those polygroups to do some cleanup, you know, it's like bring this higher again and stuff like that. But for now, I have my little frog in there. So just gonna click Control and click outside with Control. And then now I masked everything, or you can just do like the mask all the way, right? Then invert again. So if I unhide, now they are masked, right? But before I do that, what I can do here as well, I can do this. I can go by topology. You can switch to move, scale, or rotate here. You have your transpose in there. So if you click Control and then you drag, then you're gonna be dragging by topology, right? If you want to go maybe like a little higher resolution, oh, you don't have a higher resolution here. Before you do this, if you want to, you can actually subdivide first before you do this, and then you have access to a little bit more finer control. But in this case here, it should be fine. So let's just do that. I'm just gonna add a little mask around here. Just make sure that I'm masking everything but the eyelids in there, the very edges of the eyelids. So I'm gonna do this and then reverse it. Oops, reverse it. So now it's masked inside of it. And now I can actually unhide everything. So now I have combined a selection that includes the inside of the eye bags and then a little bit of this edge in here internally, because otherwise you're gonna end up like having the projection done a little bit funny, you know. And then I have the projection, the selection here all the way to this internal part of the lips in here, which I'm gonna have to project manually at the end, right? Or, you know, I could maybe like potentially just like unmask very carefully until the beginning of the pocket in there, but not necessarily. So let's do this. And then before we start, now that we have our selection, let's just do a morph target again, because it's another thing we can use to recover things. So there's a morph target and the selection done now. So the way ZWrap works, basically like you put your base mesh at the top. I noticed that ZWrap, sometimes if you have numbers like this or some weird characters, sometimes it causes trouble. So I'm gonna just name this base mesh, something like that. And then in the second layer, I'm gonna have my original mesh, which can be like very high res like we have here. But in this case, I'm gonna do like maybe like 647 should be more than enough for it to do. And then I'm gonna keep it both visible. I'm gonna click my base mesh. And then I'm gonna go, once you have it installed, you're gonna go to Z plugin, start ZWrap. Oh, look at that. Man, if I knew, I would have asked some money, you know. But so originally, you don't have this turned on in here. So basically, like they are out of sync. But if you click the sync views, it basically synchronizes, right? So we can actually have access to the same angles and everything. It's easier to create those points. You can actually do this by session. I did this mistake before doing a live class, which was like painful to do. Which is basically like if you're adding those points, corresponding points between the two characters, you can save them to open later. But the thing is, like, it saves individually, and I didn't realize when I was doing it. So if you save the points for the left pane here, basically like, yeah, it's not gonna save for the right one. So you have to save individually here and here, and then load them individually. Otherwise, if you just do the points in here, it doesn't find the corresponding ones automatically, you know? So yeah, living and learning. And then you have the options here to create like in symmetry as well. So if you do symmetry in X, for example, now you have symmetry on. Here is not on, so you have to turn it on as well, right? And the way it works is very simple. So the only things I did so far, I click sync views and I click symmetry for both, right? So the next step is to actually put the points, the corresponding points in place. So I'm gonna start with the eye in here with the corners, for example. Since I have symmetry, I should be able to just click the corner right here. So 1, let's do maybe like, let's do a little bit more here. Let's do 5 at the top. Let's see if that does a good job. 4, 5, like that. So I got like a total of 10 points, right? From 0 to 9. So I can do the same thing around here. So I'm gonna start with the 1. So you have to make sure that those numbers match between the two views. Otherwise, things are not gonna work. So I'm gonna go 6. And like I said, I mean, like ZWrap, I don't have a ton of experience like knowing how many points is the best option. Sometimes I get better results with very few ones. Sometimes I get better results with more of them. So it's kind of like, it's the algorithm, the way it works, you know, that sometimes gives you better results in a way or the other. But in this case here, just gonna go a little bit more on the higher poly side of things, but not super high, right? Just a little bit. So 10, let's do 12, and then 14. So everything corresponded so far. For the nose, you don't need to do a lot. I normally get just like the corners. So for example, like this little point corresponding to that little point. Or even better, let's just do like a little bit higher right here so I can get that. And then let's get like the nostril, for example, like this point corresponding to that point right there. And maybe, I don't even know if I need too much in here, probably not. Let's just put 2 points in here. So that's corresponded. And then the corners of the mouth, let's do it here. You can go like between one and the other one, like that. Or you can just do a bunch and then go and do a bunch in the next one. And then let's get the edge. I don't know exactly where the edge is here, but I can just do something like this. So let's do it around here and there. And then here and here. So 28, 28, 30, right there. And then let's see what else we can do here. So for the ears, let's give a couple of clues in here. So let's get this little guy right there, responding to this one. And then let's get maybe this area here, around there. Just lower him here. And then maybe around here. And I hope it's going to be able to solve that way. Maybe one like inside of the ear right there. No, I don't think I need that. I think it should be fine. And then for the bigger forms, you can get like some few clues. For example, like if you want your clavicle there, and maybe some other spots like this, and the corner of the arm right here. Let's see, something around the neck, maybe on the back. So around here and here, just give a couple of clues in there. And then a major one would be just like maybe around, let's see from the side, around here, and then around there. It's going to stretch the topology. It's going to do the shrink wrap anyway. It's just a matter of like how the topology is going to travel over the surface, you know? So that's the main concern in there. Not concern, but something to pay attention to. So that little fold. So we can try to do it and see if it doesn't work, we do it again. Let's try to save this first. So I'm going to do like the left two. We're going to save this as a TX file, and then the right two. Basically, like just to have a little backup of those points I did if we need to remove something later, you know. And then, so the next step is very simple. We just go to your wrapping, right? Let's see, I think, yeah, I think it should be good. So wrapping. And then here, you're gonna see they're kind of like overlapping a little bit, right? There is one thing you can do here. You can do like a match scale and rigid alignment. So let's do like a match scale first. Actually, let's do just the, oh, it doesn't accept my, undoing here for some reason, but it's okay. So let's do just like rigid alignment. No, I'm gonna try it without it. I think I'm gonna try just without it. And then, so we are here, and now you're gonna click start wrapping, and you wait to see what happens. I mean, like it does a bunch of different iterations. It shouldn't take like a huge amount of time, but it's not instant for sure. So, you know, it's like in the videos you see it doing, it basically like, looks like it's pretty instant, right? It's not definitely instantly, but it's fast enough. If you have like a lower res mesh, right? If it's like a much higher res, that's not so much. Let's just see if I can. So it finished right now. So it's quite fast. I think they improved actually the algorithm. So let's do here. So now I have it shrink wrapped. Let's see how it looks like. Much better than it was before, right? Like you got the little topology in there, which is kind of nice. You did a good job around that area. And then the only thing we have to worry about now is to recover those areas around the, you know, it's like the selected areas, right? So let's do this by hiding what's not gonna touch the surface in there, like the edges at all, which is basically like this area around here. So we don't need that right now. Obviously in your mesh, it's gonna look different and everything, but so in my case, I'm gonna just remove those ones, just like hide them. And I'm more concerned about this edge right here that's selected still, and then this little edge that's selected still. So I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna reverse the selection, right? And now what I can do, I can turn on the background in there, and then I can do like either do like an automatic kind of projection just in those areas to see what happens. But I'm afraid that this one's gonna get a little destroyed. So for in this case here, for the eyes themselves, I'm gonna consider that they're in a good position and I'm not gonna worry about them. But I'm gonna try to shrink wrap this one a little bit better. Let's see if it's, yeah, it's going inside. So in that case, instead of shrink wrapping, I can try to actually use a little project brush, a morph brush. actually, in this case, here's going to be a project brush. So let's do like a Z project, sorry, Z project. So Z project. And the only problem with the Z project is that it's based on the normals, right? So if you do something that's outside of the normals, it's going to look a little weird. So in this case here, I can just do like carefully like that. Just try to capture that line. Again, you see like the topology if it's not perfect in there. Yeah, I think like the best way for me to do this is going to be like to do a little bit of move manually and make sure that's close enough, and then I can just do like a reprojection overall. Oh, sorry, I am using, I forgot about my symmetry in here for a second. Just gonna do this manually a little bit, just to get a little bit closer. And this one here as well. And now we can start thinking about projecting things to a higher resolution, because we're going to be able to capture a lot of those details, right? So let's do this. Let's hide this one. Now I have my little guy in there with a fairly decent topology. We can still adjust the topology at this point using a trick that one of my students taught me. And then we can go from there. So let's subdivide this mesh here. So make sure that we have everything unhidden, right? Like unhide everything. Everything has to be visible. And then you're gonna subdivide the mesh first. So before you do this, let's talk about like, oh, look at the nodes here. I'm gonna solve this problem here using that trick that I told you. So check this out. So if you wanna solve this and make sure that everything, you can slide the edges across the surface without losing the forms themselves, you can use this trick that's really cool. Basically, like you're gonna do, like you're gonna create another morph target. So basically, like you're gonna delete that one. I already used it. So I'm gonna store a morph target, and then I can just use the move topological brushing here, and I'm gonna just stretch this to conform more to that surface that I have in there. That has that little bump, right? So I want that area to look a little bit more open, so I can get fit more detail in there when I do my stuff. So here, same thing. I can actually tweak everything that's a little bit out of place, not quite with the forms that I want. For example, like if I want to bring this area here up a little bit, so my polygons get a little bit more concentrated in there, I can do all this stuff right now and go across the whole mesh basically, and tweak things like that. Just move freely, right? Make sure that you're unstretching things as you go. And then at the end, you can just do this. Let's see, there's a little bit of, see that part here got a little weird in there. Gonna have to resim this area here. Probably gonna do this in Maya later. Yeah, just to make sure the symmetry is working. So now that you have that stuff a little bit more spread out, I can do this around here, for example, right? Bring it up. Then you can use this project morph, which is amazing. So you click and you drag all the way to the end and you release it. And look at that. It basically reprojected the same forms you had originally. You just made everything slide. So if I do like an exaggerated version here, you're gonna see exactly what it does. So if I do something like, let's try to go like a little bit more on the surface like that. If I do something like this and I use the project morph, basically like it's gonna slide those edges and you're gonna reconform to the previous forms, right? Which is really cool. So yeah, that's a very useful tip from Omid. That's one of my students. And then for the nose here, seems like everything is working fine. I don't think you're gonna have a ton of trouble. There's a little bit of a stretch here that I can try to solve. Maybe like bring those guys towards here a little bit, so it kind of like unstretches in there. And then do a little smooth as well. And just do a project morph again. See, it reconforms, rebuilds that area for you with the original forms. Let's see, ears should be okay. Yeah, it looks good. Here, there's a problem right there, you see. Just gonna smooth out this whole area. I can even like drag this whole thing down if I wanted to, you know, it's like to make sure that this is more evenly distributed, kind of like that. And then you can just do it again. Project morph, boom. You can keep doing this forever if you want. You're always gonna find the original. And then that's basically it. So now let's talk about the topology itself. Like why do I have like 17,000 polys here and not more or less? Basically, like the way it works, it's you have to plan your model to take advantage of the HD geometry, right? Like, so that's the best way to describe is to actually, yeah, it's all about planning, right? We're gonna do this, I'm gonna just stretch this. I keep looking at stuff, it bothers me, so I'm gonna just do that and then do the project morph again, something like that. So basically, like I have 17,328. So let's bring up like my calculator in here, right? So I have like 17.328. So what if I divide this, for example, if every subdivision level you add, it multiplies everything by 4, right? So I'm going to multiply this by 4, and I got 69,312, which would be another possible poly count for my base mesh. I could use either the 17 or 69. 17 is much more low res. It's easier for me to tweak my base forms for the primary forms, so that's why I keep that way. And then I'm gonna subdivide once again. So I go to 277, which is already too high for a base mesh. And then subdividing again, I get to 1.1 million polygons. And I can keep going until I find a number that actually it's my ideal number for a head and shoulders model in HD geometry. I would say that the number that between like 70 to 100,000 polys, 100 million polygons would be ideal to capture like pore detail and wrinkle detail, right? In my case here, this entire head and shoulders have about 72 million polygons, and I can capture a ton of pore detail, but at the same time, it's not like in certain areas, I don't have like a lot of space for that, especially like in an area like, you know, it's like this one that I just stretched, you know, it's like, I just pulled, like originally the model was supposed to end right here, but I forced and I stretched the whole thing down. So this area here is not going to have a ton of polygons, obviously. And on the other hand, like the ears, like I mentioned, you know, it's like going to have way too many polygons. It's all a matter of like planning correctly. But let's take a look here, back to my calculator. So let's talk about the HD geometry. Since we started doing this subdivision here, pretending that you guys have your base meshes already all done in there. So the way that HD geometry works the best is if you don't subdivide further than 2 million polygons at the base. So for example, if I'm subdividing this mesh here, there are like two types of subdivision. One is gonna be subdividing like the regular way, right? Like you're just gonna click like dividing here, right? Or Control D is gonna add one subdivision level, and you keep doing that. And the other way is to go to Geometry HD and divide HD, right? So for the HD to work correctly, you should not pass 2 million polygons at the regular subdivision levels before you go HD. So in this case here, you can see that I subdivided that number, 17,000, a couple of times, like 4 times, or 3 times, I don't remember. And then I got to 1.1 million. If I subdivided once more, I would reach like 4.4 million polygons, and that's way past the 2 million polygons limit, right? So at this point, I should be happy at around 1,100,000 polys. So let's do this now. My mesh right now at 17,000 polys. I'm gonna subdivide once, twice, 3 times, and I got to 1.1, right? Which is basically like the same number right there. And now I can actually go and subdivide HD, right? To subdivide HD, now I'm gonna have to keep doing the same thing. I'm gonna subdivide, let's do like one more subdivision by 4, right? And then by 4, then by 4. So I reached like 70.975. So it's 71 million polygons. If I went further than that, that would bring me to 283 million polygons, which is workable. I mean, like I had some models I work around like 250 million polygons, but it's kind of like a full body character. You can put like a ton of detail everywhere at that level. If it's just a head and a shoulder, I would not go past like the previous subdivision level. Now, let's pretend you're gonna do like a planning. You don't have your base mesh started just yet, right? So I told you that the ideal number would be between 72 million polygons for head and shoulders like that to 100 million polygons, right? So let's say at 71 million polygons, that's basically what I had in there, right? Something like that. you can say, okay, this is my target. I want to have my character to have 71 million polygons. You can do the opposite to kind of like calculate how many polygons you're going to need in the base mesh. So you're going to be doing the opposite. Going to divide this by 4 many times, right? And then you're going to reach 69,000 or 17,000 polys. So you know your base mesh is going to need to be 17,000 polys or 69,000 polys to reach that 71 million polygons at the end for the HD. So that's how you plan. So let's say if you want to use like the maximum amount of polys, like to get like a nice amount of detail in pores and everything, let's say your ideal would be, let's say like an ideal number for this kind of model would be 90 million polygons, something like that, right? So you basically like, so you're going to divide this by 4 many times and going to reach 87,000 or 21, so basically like 22,000 polys for your mesh. In my case here, so if I have like 17,000 polys, I could potentially, for example, add more edge loops in certain areas. For example, I could add more edge loops around the head or the shoulders around this area here, could add a bunch of edge loops until I reached around 22,000 polys. And then in that case, when I have 22,000 polys in the base mesh, I know that if I subdivide, I'm gonna reach around 90 million polygons at the end of the day, right? So that's basically like how you plan a model so you don't pass it. You know, it's like, because there's this funny thing that happens sometimes. If you start with a certain number, all of a sudden, if you subdivide once more, then the number becomes much bigger than you need, and it's such a waste. So this way is kind of like a very, kind of like, it's a smart way to do it because you get just enough to get the job done, you know? So basically like, that's the way I plan my model. I calculated around that. And then I said, you know, 17,000 polys should give me enough stuff. Nowadays, after doing all those classes, I would go a little bit higher. So probably like around 20,000 polys for the base mesh would be kind of ideal to reach a little bit more polygons. But like I said, let's pretend you guys subdivide your mesh so you reach like no more than 2 billion polygons. So if you got like 900,000, right? You're not going to subdivide again because that's going to be multiplied by 4. And in that case, it's going to get to 3.6 million polygons. So you're not going to go higher than 900,000 polys, right? In my case here, I reached like 1.1. I'm happy with it. And now I can actually subdivide HD. To subdivide HD, you're just going to click this button a couple of times. And then you're going to see this number growing in here. So this is the total amount of polys I have in my entire scene at this point, right? 3.7 million. And it's not going to show anything in the viewport until you actually press a key to ask ZBrush to go HD. But it's just like virtually it's going to subdivide it in here. But before we do this, let's do some projection first, because we still need to capture some of this detail that's in this sketching here that I want to, you know, preserve. I don't want to get rid of everything because there's some interesting detail. I have at this level 647,000 polys, and at this level I have 2.5 million polygons. So I'm going to go to my, you know, maybe like the highest resolution here. You can do step by step if you want. You know, it's like you go like one by one level and then do the subdivision. But let's do this. Let's do the same thing I did before. I'm going to hide the inside of those pockets. I'm going to get the carunculus in there hidden as well. Right there. And then this pocket in there. So I get it hidden. Let's see, nothing else. Yep, that's good. And then let's do this. Oh, there's another one right there. Let's do this. Let's just create a little mask again. Now I have more resolution, so I can actually do it like that and preserve that whole edge. That's why it's important to have the edge loops flowing kind of like not perfectly, but close enough to the edge, you know? So when you select the edge loop, it's not going to go like all wonky, like selects all the way down here, and here is just around the edge, you know? You need to make sure that things are fairly in place. So now it's masked just inside. And I'm going to just mask this around here as well. I can do like another way to do this is it's simpler actually. I can do this. Let me just turn off the coloring here because it's bothering me like the makeup. So now that I have like this gaps opening here, I have like those holes open. I can actually do another thing. I can go by masking, and you can select by feature, and you can just say border, right? and then you can actually grow the mask. So you're gonna grow the mask first, and then you're gonna sharpen it a couple of times. Let me make sure that I'm doing it correctly here. So mask by feature, border, grow, blur, grow, let's sharpen it. Let's see, at some point you're gonna start seeing it right there. So I'm gonna grow it right there. Actually, let me switch the material so you can see it. Flat color. So you see right there, I'm gonna start sharpen it. There you go. Oh, grow, and then sharpen it. Grow, sharpen it. So now I have a mask that was created just around those edges in there, right? In the lips, and then for the eyes, which is good. So let's do this skin shade, not skin shade, the basic material. So now I have this masked, and inside of those pockets masked as well. Actually, that one is not masked. Make sure that those are masked, like everything. Huh, interesting. I guess I didn't mask it before, so let's try. Let me just hide them and mask them now, because I want to make sure I'm projecting just what I need. Let's get the carbuncle again. Right there. And let's see, is everything good? Yeah, so let's just reverse it and mask everything here, like that. So now it's a combination of what's inside and then the edges in here all masked. So let's go to a higher res. I can just go like 277,000 polys and do like a quick projection here. And let's see how it behaves with it. I can actually every time just do like a morph target as well if you want to make sure you're saving things to recover later. So you can actually recover with a morph brush. You know, it's like if something got a little wonky. But let's go to subtool and then project. And let's say the distance at default is 0.02, which should be good. But it's, sometimes if it's too much or too little, we have to play with that. And it's like very, very sensitive. So you have to use like very small increments. Let's do a project all in here. So you worked, I think, fairly well. Let's see if I hide this guy here, right? I could potentially slide those edges using that same trick that I showed you guys before with the brush, with the morph. So, oh, see, there's a problem that happened in there. It's kind of like it's penetrating right there, right? So one thing I can do here to fix it for now, you can just do like a morph brush. Let's try that first. So morph brush, let's just morph it back just to recover that little area. And then I'm gonna just use a little bit of a manual mask just for that area. Maybe too much, I'm just gonna remove part of it. Make sure that those areas that cause trouble, you know, it's like, let's see in the corner of the eye, for example, if there's anything funky in there. You can always do the same process, you know, it's like do a little morph just to recover it and then mask it again, just like a tiny little mask just to make sure that's not penetrating or anything like that. Let's see if the ear is fine. See, the ear has some trouble, so I'm gonna use my morph in there just to recover that. And then I can actually do either like manually move it a little bit closer to the surface so it doesn't do anything funny like that. And then at this point here, if I'm happy with the corrections I did, you know, it's like with those penetrations in there. Oh, see, there's another one in there is trouble. Kind of stuff that I have to do manually, you know, it's like either I select it so it's not projected, or I can just like go closer to the surface. In this case here, let's just go closer to the surface. Let's do a more move. I'm just gonna bring it down here. Make sure it's a little bit closer. Just smooth it out. Something like that. Those areas you can definitely see where the problems happen, and then you can just recover them with a quick morph brush. And then this area here that I mentioned before, I can actually make sure that those edges are following the forms a little bit better. So I can use that trick. Let's say I'm gonna destroy my, my morph target at this point. So I'm just gonna go delete, store, and then I can do that trick again. So I'm gonna use my topological move brush. And I'm just gonna go here and make sure that those edges are following a little bit the wrinkles a little bit better. So I'm gonna bring those back around here and those ones up like that. And I can just do a little smooth and then project morph. So it goes back in there, preserves the position where I put the edges, but it reconforms the forms themselves, right? So I can do that back and forth until you get something that flows with the topology a little bit better. Doesn't need to be perfect, but if you want the detail to look sharp, you're definitely gonna have to do this more carefully. So around here, you can actually pull those guys a little bit more and smooth it out. And then let's do another project morph like that. Yeah, so it looks a little bit better now. And then, so we can keep doing this with the other resolutions. So we have like just one subdivision level so far. Let's do another one here and let's project again. Now we have a little bit more of a mask in there, so we should preserve that corner and that corner. And then we can manually sculpt it later because, like I said, it's just a sketch. So we still have plenty of fun to have with this. So let's do at the 1.1 million, which is the maximum res I have at this level, right? And at this point here, I'm gonna consider like I'm happy with it because even though it doesn't capture like, let's say like the 2.5 million polygons I had in my sketch, I have enough detail to go with right here. And because the topology is much better than it was before, now the details should be in a better position anyway, you know? So that kind of stuff, you know, it's like little artifacts and stuff I can fix later like that, you know, just do a little smooth in there. But overall, it looks pretty nice for what I need. So basically like, yeah, see like this area here, for example, like there are a couple of artifacts, but you know, it's like nothing that we cannot resolve. But the thing that's bothering me a little bit is that since ZBrush is a little broken, I'm afraid, for example, I'm not going to be able to have like a perfectly symmetrical model at this point. And let's just try here, but I don't think it's going to do it, man, based on what you guys told me and what happened here before. So let's see, Smart Resim. Oh, it actually worked just because I said it. Now it worked. Look at that. It went from this to this. It worked. But like I said before, the center line, ZBrush messes up sometimes, or most of the time, right? With this resim thing. So let's see, if I did the resim at the lowest level, I can go one subdivision higher and do it again. Go one higher, do it again. And one higher and do it again. The reason why I'm doing like step by step is because ZBrush tries to calculate all the polygons across the entire thing based on their distance. And if they are like all over the place, it's much faster to do step by step than trying to do in a single scoop, because it's gonna get a little confused trying to find those points like too far from the center, you know. But at this point here, I have it in a fairly good point with symmetry, right? Other than that center line. So let's do something here. Let's try to fix that center line in Maya. So I'm gonna export it. Base mesh 2. Bring it to Maya here.
Hey, Chris, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So if you were building a mesh that was, or a creature or a person, whatever, that is asymmetrical,
yeah,
how do you handle all this other stuff? Would you just mirror it and then create asymmetry later?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're planning to do something asymmetrical, I would say like for what we work here for the class, I would say, yeah, try to make it symmetrical anyway. Pick one of the sides that you think like is the one that looks the best. Because I mean, like if you're trying to do likeness, for example, it's such an impossible task, right? To get like a likeness to nail someone who is completely asymmetrical. So I know it's like, it's asking too much for people to like try to imagine a symmetrical version of that person. But I would say like keep if you're doing like a sketch that's completely asymmetrical, save that sketch. Try to pick one side and create the symmetrical version. As soon as you have a symmetrical version of the mesh, then you can actually create a morph target or just export as a different OBJ, so you can use for importing later, and then conform back to that asymmetrical model. So at some point, you're going to have, for example, like an asymmetrical model with a perfectly symmetrical topology, and a perfect model with the same topology, but perfectly symmetrical in terms of form as well. So for the purpose of adding all the pores and wrinkles and all this stuff, you can re-import the base mesh that's completely symmetrical, so you don't need to sculpt things twice. And then once we are happy with that, then you switch back to the asymmetrical model and then keep going with that, you know? Hello? Oh, your sound went away for a second. Yeah, it went, it's very low right now.
Yeah, my headset is dying. So, but it's kind of like 4D. If we were handling UVs and then we were going with the 3D model.
Yeah, with the UVs, I would try to do like you know, as symmetrical as possible with them. But I mean, like if I show you like this, the base mesh I have right here, my UVs are quite simple. It's the Modeling UV editor. So I have like 2 UDIMs in here, and they are kind of symmetrical, but not quite, right? Like it's just like fairly symmetrical. At work, we use tools, obviously, to split the model and create everything symmetrical. And then there's the overlapping as well. Like one side overlaps the other side as well. They try to, you know, they use this kind of pipeline in there. But in my case here, I just like split everything manually and create the, you know, the topology. At the end, after you have like the final model we sculpted and everything, obviously you have to keep like coming back to your UVs and then just like unwrapping all the way to the end until you have everything that conforms to that model a little bit better, you know, before you go to the next step in texture and everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. So let's talk about UV since we are here. I would wait until like next week to talk about it, but let's get this out of the way since we are here. Originally, if you watch my previous classes, I was using like 5 UDIMs. And if you don't know what a UDIM is, I mean, like people working with games, sometimes they only use like 1 UDIM, which is like one of those little squares in here. So 0 to 1, right? And they pack everything in there. So it has like clothes, it has the face, it has everything. Nowadays, I mean, like since the games are getting more and more complex and things like the Unity and, you know, it's like a lot of like the Epic stuff, right? Like it's just like a real engine. Everything is being handled like at much higher levels and, you know, handle like billions of polygons potentially. Things are getting more and more like closely to visual effects, kind of like pipeline, you know, it's like you can have multiple UDIMs and things like that. But let's say like if you're old school gamer, you know, it's like working games, you're probably going to use just like 1 or 2 aisles here, one for the body, the other one for the clothes and stuff. In our case here, we are free to use as many as we want, right? So I have like all those squares in here, and each one of them is a UDIM. So how do you calculate how many UDIMs you're going to need? It all depends, right? Like the first thing we have to think about is that how can we compress and represent the 90 million polygons that we are planning to have for an HD modeling here, right? Or in my case, 71 million polygons at the end of the day. How are we planning to represent that as a displacement map? So if I try to just like simply add this, create like one single UDIM and with the 4K map and try to capture all those details, it's not going to happen. And the reason why is this. So basically, like if you have a 4K map, you have like 4,096 pixels multiplied by 4,096 pixels to create like the square. So we have a potential of 16 million points, right? Which is basically like 16 million pixels in ZBrush. So that's basically like the maximum amount of polygons you can have represented in one 4K map. But we are talking about if you use like 100% of your UDIM, which is not the case. You see, I have a lot of gaps in here. All those blank areas in here, it's not using anything, right? So it's virtually impossible to use 16 million polygons in here. But I can actually estimate maybe like visually. I remember back in the day, there was a script for Maya that would give you the percentage of the UDIM that's being used. I think that script still exists. I don't have it here, but I think it still exists. And then, so in this case here, I normally estimate like around 50% used. But in this case here, I'm definitely higher than that. Let's say like I have like 70% used in there and maybe lower in here. But the lower in here, it doesn't matter that much because all those pieces are from the underneath the model. So it's like less important stuff. So for example, like this whole base here, who cares about that, right? You don't need to have any UDIMs in there at all. So it's basically like for this UDIM, I only have like the ears and some of the inner mouth and inner eyes, and then the bottom part. But most of the stuff is being handled by one single UDIM for the face and for the shoulders. Like I said, like in the past, I had like 5 UDIMs, and that was kind of like overkill. So let's see what's the philosophy behind this. So we talked about like having a 4K map, being able to represent only 16 million polygons in theory, right? Now, if you switch to a 8K map, so like an 8K map is basically like 4 4K maps put together, right? Imagine like if you split this one in 4, you're gonna have 4 maps in here, 4K. So if you multiply this 8192 by 8192, you have theoretical 67 million polygons in one single square like this, right? But in my case, I mean, like I have 71 million polygons, right? So if I consider that 67 million polygons is the theoretical amount of polygons I have for this aisle here, if I multiply this by, let's say, like 0.7, which is like 70% of the aisle being used, I might have like 80% actually, might be more than that. But that's 0.7, I get like 46 million polygons, basically 47 million polygons just for that aisle alone, right? If I, let's say, if I have that, so I'm gonna need to have more polygons in this area here. So if I calculate the 2 areas, let's do like an average, like 60% between the 2 of them. So let's do it again, 8192 times 8192, right? 67, so we have like two of those aisles. So let's do like 2 aisles. So we have a potential of 134 million polygons between the 2 aisles here, between the 2 UDIMs. So if I do like a multiplication by 60%, something like that, so I get around 80 million polygons represented in here. If I have 60% of the space being used by my UVs in here, right? At 80 million polygons, basically I can cover the entire thing because my model is around like 72 million polygons. Now, I normally like to leave a little bit of a buffer, you know? So I would say like ideally, instead of 2 UVs, 2 UDIMs, I think ideally for my model, 3 would be a safer bet, you know? Because at 80, between 80 and 72 is pretty close. I might, in certain areas in here, I might be missing some of the detail from the displacement map coming from a 72 million polygon sculpture, you know? So what I'm gonna do between today and you know, this weekend, I'm gonna try to redo the UVs in here just to split things a little bit better, you know, so I can try to cover around 3 aisles instead of 2, just to have a little bit more buffer. But around this, even if I miss some of the detail, the only thing that's gonna happen is that some of the pores, for example, are gonna be slightly more blurry in certain areas, you know, but shouldn't be bad at all. Now, what's happening here, you notice that this model here, it's very different from the other model that the projection was done to, right? So I have to make sure that everything is unwrapped. So let's do, oh man, there's another thing here. The unwrap, I'm using like my machine here is a thread ripper. And the thread rippers, you have to actually add one file that makes things work for the thread rippers. Otherwise, it doesn't do the unwrap. Since I updated my Maya, I hope that they fix that. If they didn't fix, I'm gonna have to copy that file and do it again. So under modify, actually under tools, you can just do unfold. And basically like the problem that, oh, interesting. Oh, they don't have the unfold 3D and the legacy anymore, huh? So they changed that. Well, I hope it works. Huh, interesting. Oh, no, that's the tool. Okay, that's the tool. But the legacy should be there as well. So let's go to modify and unfold. So Control U. Oh, they have in here. So let's say if we get an error here, that we know that's because of my thread ripper. If you have an Intel processor, you should be completely fine. So let's try this. See, unfold 3D process error. So this should be fixed. I can point you to the solution. Is actually in our website. It's plugged at the very top of our group. It's right here. So you're gonna see like boom in there, right? This was from a student, Natalia. He said that the Unfold 3D process error was solved by doing this. There you go, Unfold 3D processor. So like it's solved, go to solution. So if you click that one, it's gonna go to the solution. And it's around here. So basically like someone modified a file in here, which is this unfold, let's see, copy and replace the files in the bin, and already renamed unfold shim. So you just need to replace the file. Okay, so he already replaced. So let's just download this one. Let's click this one here. So we're gonna open it.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I actually have a Threadripper, and I found out the issue is when you select everything through UVs or verts, that's when you have the issue. So if you would go back and just select everything as a shell and then unfold it, that's what I've always been doing. And
oh, it's kind of like a workaround for it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this one actually solves it for good, man. So check this out. Let's do this now. Let's see if we can solve it, because we just got the error. Yeah, so let's try to go to, we're gonna go to the, let's see, Programs Autodesk. So it's inside of the installation folder, Autodesk. And then let's go to Autodesk Maya 2020, and then bin. So inside here, right, we're gonna just drop, and you're gonna replace this file called unfold. Let's see, unfold 3D, well, it's like shim, this one here, right? So just gonna click this one. Oh, there's another one. So I'm gonna put both of them in there. Let's see if he accepts it to replace. Let's see. Okay, let's see if it solves like that, if I have to reload Maya or something. I hope it resolves like that. Let's try apply again. Boom, it worked. So yeah, that's the solution. So in this case here, it works as the old Maya was supposed to work. And the solution, as usual, didn't come from Autodesk. It came from some user in there, you know, because Autodesk is, you know, they don't resolve the problems very, very much. So at this point here, so with the UVs, we can actually just like move stuff around. Make sure that when you have your UVs placed, they don't cross the line, obviously going to the other UDIM. So make sure that everything is inside its own UDIM. Otherwise, ZBrush gets very confused because it tries to represent the displacement maps, and it kind of ends up like shooting across. So you get like those streaks across the whole model. It's pretty ugly, you know. So if you have something like this, you can use like a, you know, a slight, you know, it's like scale tool here, just to make sure that things move back in place. Let's do the same for those guys here, and then basically like for those guys, I think you're gonna have to scale down both a little bit. Actually, if you can do like, the biggest you can do, the better, just like to make sure that you're using like the maximum amount of area for the UDIMs. So let's do something like this. So it should be close enough. And it's like, make sure that those guys are not touching as well, right? Like if you get something that's too close like that, and your ZBrush has a buffer just like 4 pixels or something, you might get one of those, you know, those areas leaking into the other one. Is going to cause a mess as well. ZBrush is extremely sensitive to UVs. So if you have any interpenetrations happening, if you have anything crossing this line, ZBrush is going to create all kinds of problems, and then you're going to end up like without any hair, you know. So let's do this for this area here as well. Let's do like Control U for the unfold. Done. Let's do this, 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 and this. This is gonna move it up. And this is just temporary, obviously. As I work more in the model, later on I'm gonna be, you know, it's like doing this again, just to make sure things are completely unfolded. So let's do this and that. Oops, double click right there. And then, I mean, like UVs, I normally don't talk about it because, again, like it's a basic thing, right? Like we are a little bit more like a advanced side of things here. But I normally, if I have to do the UVs from scratch, let's just save this guy here. Let's do like delete all history here. Let's delete those guys here as well. But if I have to do the UVs from scratch, I would start with ZBrush first. and doing like selecting by polygroups. So for example, like if you go back here, you can select things by polygroups. You get like those loops in place. All this stuff was done with polygroups in here, right? And then if I do, for example, like a duplication of this model, let's do like a duplicate. So this one here is a duplicate of that one. And then I can just, let's pretend this one I'm starting from scratch. So I'm gonna just do a geometry, I'm gonna delete all the higher stuff. So if you have your polygroups defined in ZBrush, like I did in here, when you do your first pass to create the UDIMs or the UVs, you can just go to the plugin and then UV master, right? Keep the symmetry on, and then you can turn on also the, let's see, polygroups, right? Keep polygroups on. So it's gonna take into account the polygroups to do the splits for you. And then you can just say unwrap. And let's export this mesh here. Base mesh, UV test, something like that. And let's see what's the first pass, what ZBrush did in comparison to this guy here. So this guy here, we got the UVs looking like this. Like that, right? Let's just hide him and just import the new one. So the UVs are kind of packed right there, right? So there are a couple of things you can do. I mean, like you could potentially like use the way it is, right? Or you can actually start like maybe like regrouping things. For example, like attaching things if you want to have things attached. You can, for example, if you have something like this line right here, you see like it's crossing around here. If you want to continue and split this a little bit further, you can just select like that. Let's actually make sure that I have my symmetry on here before I do this. Topology, and then select one single edge in here. So if I do a double click right here, goes all the way across. I'm gonna just deselect everything over that. Make sure my selection is just, let's see with this line here. It's just around there. And then now you're gonna see that selection happening right here in the UVs, right? So you see crossing right there and right there. So you can just go to cut and sew and just do a cut. And now that area is cut as well. And then you can do the same thing, like basically like reattaching to different areas. If I wanted, for example, like this line here, this edge right here, I can click on it and then double click to the end of it, something like that. So you selected the whole area, right? And you're gonna see it selected right there as well. You can do like a move and sew like that. So you're gonna see the face now was connected in there. Before it was like this, right? So let's just redo it, edit, Control Y. So you basically like reattach to it. So it's your option, you know, it's like how you want to attach those things. If you want to attach the whole face and have it, the whole face facing you, you know, you can attach right in the middle the same way. But the important thing is that before you do anything else, make sure that you double click and try to unwrap this, you know. Let's see. So Control U. So now it's a little bit more square again. So, you know, it's like, it's a matter of like how you're going to be planning this for UVs. But I would say like that starting with the UV master is a great way to go because it saves you a lot of time just like unwrapping things in general, you know. And then if you have like, for example, let's say, let's go get back in here, modeling UV editor. So if you have something like this, right, this whole face here selected, I can just convert it to face, Control F11, right? So now it's a face. And I can do it again, for example, I can just go to UVs and I can say, use like a cylindrical UV for me, right? So I can just do apply here. And then if I go back to my UV editor, now I have the face completely spread out like that. And then I can just say, okay, so can you please just unwrap this for me again? So go Control U, and then it unwraps like that, right? Which might be your option. The thing about this is that because it's so horizontal, you're probably gonna be pain in the butt to use the maximum amount of space in the UDIMs. So that's why normally I cut in the middle, you know? Again, like to cut in the middle, you can just like double click the middle here, something like that, right? And you can just go to cut and sew, just do like cut. And now I can just like UV, double click one of those guys. Actually, I have symmetry on. That's why every time I double click, it selects both. So I'm going to select this one. So now we can actually unwrap again. So Control U, right? So you have like two faces in there. And that way it might be a little bit easier. And also the stretch that happens in the nose, it's pretty much solved when you do a cut right in the middle. Some people are concerned about like, oh, but that's going to cause some kind of seam and artifact in the middle. And it doesn't happen, you know. It's like with HD geometry, it's like it's very rare to have some kind of artifact. It normally exports everything with you know, seamless. But you have to make sure that your dims are all clean, you know, things are clean. See, like if you want to fix something like that crap in there, you can do this as well. So just do like a double click from here to here. You can just do a cut, right? And then you can do select this area here. For example, you can select even the inner faces in there, doesn't matter. Select like that, and then you just do like a move ensue, and then it pops back right there. Same with those guys here. If I want to solve that cut in there, move ensue, same thing. And then you can at any time just select everything again, and then Control U, and then it's resolved again. So that's basically like the way I do my UVs, you know. It's like a cylindrical to start with the face, but normally like for the bulk of it, a lot of those pieces I don't need to redo anything. I can just use straight from ZBrush, you know, especially like the inside of the eyes and things like that. So an easy way to do it, you know. So just, I normally don't talk about UVs, but you know, it's just a little tiny tutorial in there. So now we have our mesh, and we already spoke about the planning for it and everything, but our mesh is still not HD geometry. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna subdivide HD. So at this point here, this is just my copy. Let's get rid of this copy we're just messing around with. Let's get back to our base mesh that now has 1.1 million polygons. And this should be ready for HD. But the thing is, like, I don't want to go HD just yet before I fix a couple of things, like in terms of topology, right? Like, for example, that kind of stuff in there. If I go HD right now, it's going to be a mess. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go HD anyway, but I'm going to save this one. And I'm going to, after I do the whole thing with you guys here, I'm going to go back to it and just fix those little artifacts and then redo the HD geometry, because I want to make sure that I don't have this kind of stuff. Sometimes when you go HD and you have artifacts like this, it just gets worse, you know, and it's hard to fix sometimes. So make sure that everything is clean. You see there's some crunched polygons in there and stuff like that. So make sure that everything is clean before you go HD. So go around the model, you know, make sure that things are not crossing like that. But for the purpose of continuing the class today, I'm going to go HD. But before I do that, let me just save this. Let's do a semi ZBrush, and then go 12. Let's go. This one actually going to name not Sketch, but now he's HD. He got promoted. So HD1 is the first version of my HD. This is going to be my buffer in there. And again, let's do go to HD. Before you go HD, make sure you don't have those things, those crunches that I show you guys. Go around, you know, it's like look around, like behind the ear, inside of the ears, especially like eye stuff, you know, it's like edges, things like that. If you have anything crunched, try to uncrunch it before you go HD. Otherwise, sometimes it's very hard to get rid of the certain problems. There is a little bit of a disconnect between the known HD subdivisions and the subdivisions, because the HD subdivisions are kind of like a virtual thing. So every time you go HD, it basically like you read some kind of virtual maps. And then every time you sculpt in HD, for all intents and purposes, you're sculpting an actual surface. But then when it saves in this virtual kind of like a cache, and then that you don't have access to until you enter the HD mode. And then you can work with HD again. So between HD and non-HD, there are a couple of problems. For example, like if you are in HD and then you sculpt your surface beautifully and you got out of HD, you're gonna notice that the highest resolution before HD is gonna have some crunchy areas that don't quite look like the HD, but it matches perfectly what HD is doing. But sometimes what happens is that if you try to smooth that out outside of HD, when you go back to HD, that form looks a little weird, you know? So it's kind of like you try to, once you understand that you have to respect both, then it's easier to work, you know? So I would say, like, instead of like working too much in the highest resolution before HD, try to work in slightly lower resolutions like that, because when you get to that highest, the HD, you know, so that little step between non-HD to HD, it actually creates a better blend. When it's too immediate, like between the highest level before HD and the first level of HD, then sometimes you get some artifacts, you know. But it's just like with experience, you're going to be able to see what I'm talking about. Otherwise, maybe you're going to just like, you're not even going to notice it, you know. So I have my model in there. First thing, make sure you don't have all the crunches anywhere. And the second thing, make sure you don't have anything selected, right? You don't want to subdivide stuff with selection. I don't even know if HD allows you to subdivide with selection, but the non-HD definitely allows you to do that and messes up the whole topology. So no crunches or no masks. So once you have that, don't pass the 2 million polygons again. Gonna remind you guys. Go to Geometry HD, and then now we're gonna subdivide it. Since I'm not gonna have exactly the idea of the amount of polygons that I'm gonna be getting by subdividing HD, I'm gonna have to deduct from this number in here, right? So if I have like 1.1 million, so in the total polys in my scene is 3.6 or 3.7 million. So that leaves about 2.6 million polygons that are not part of this model, right? They're coming from this guy here. So if I deleted the eyes and the sketch, I would get back down to 1.1 million polygons, but those numbers, extra numbers, are coming from the other ones. So I know that if I subdivide this, for example, I have to deduct about 2.6 million polygons in here to reach that number, right? So what I mean by that is this. So we go to Geometry HD, I'm gonna click Divide HD. So you see I have 7 million polygons now. Then divide again, 20 million polygons, which base like minus 2.6 million polygons, right? I'm around like 17 million polygons right now. I'm gonna subdivide it again. I got to 73.52, 572 mil, 73 million polygons and 572 mil, thousand, sorry. So in this case here, I'm gonna have to subtract the 2.6. So I know that my model is around like 71 million polygons in here, 71 and a little bit, right? So maybe a little bit less than that, 70.9 something. So that's basically where I have to stop. If I click subdivide again, this 7 is gonna become 1428. So I'm gonna have like 280 million polygons, and that's too much, right? Try not to pass, like, let's say just for face and shoulders, let's put like 100 million polygons as your limit. And we already spoke about how to make sure that happens, right? So in this case here, I'm happy with it. I already reached the number that I wanted to reach, so I'm happy with it. So HD geometry is not gonna show you anything until you actually, either you go HD mode or you do a preview. So if I do a preview in here, you just like rest your mouse outside of the model around here, you just press A, and it's gonna render for you a preview, which shows you the HD geometry. In this case here, because we don't have anything sculpted, it's gonna look like nothing, right? But to enter HD, you can just press A with the mouse resting in any part of the model. So the first thing I do when I enter HD, I try to hide stuff that's not gonna be necessary to prevent like a waste of polygons in HD mode. I should get around like 30 something million polygons at once in HD. But let's say if you have like the inner mouth visible in here, when you enter HD, it's gonna try to calculate the polygons inside of the mouth, and it's gonna be a waste of polygons. So I'm just gonna hide whatever I have like inside of the mouth and those sockets, like eyes, right? If I wanna sculpt in the caruncle, I can just keep it, you know, keep it visible in there, totally fine. And then now when I go HD, I'm sure I'm not capturing the inside of the mouth, unless you really want to sculpt inside of the mouth. And then the other thing I do, I turn off the perspective because I want to make sure that I'm projecting. When I say projecting, basically like HD works like this. If you have your mouse cursor around here, something like this, it's almost like try to imagine a cylinder that's being projected across the model. So HD geometry works like this. It creates a circle around the area where your mouse is resting. And it's basically like a virtual cylinder that just shoots across that area. So if you have like from the front like that, and you keep your mouse around here, it's going to create a circle around this area, including the back of the head. It's kind of like a cylinder that's going to cut across the entire thing. So using that same logic, if you do from the profile, you should be able to capture both sides of the face and have everything symmetrically if you have your perspective off, right? Otherwise, it's going to be wonky because it's not going to be a perfect projection of this cylinder. And then at this point here, either you can hide a bunch of other things if you want to make sure that they are not part of this session, or if you already did some hiding inside of the mouth and eyes, if you have your mouse around the nose area around here, let's say, you should be able to capture the mask pretty well, you know. Ears, in my case here, they are eating a lot of polygons because the topology is not perfect, like I said, right? But I still should be able to capture like a good chunk of the face. Let's just do this. Let's hide the ears just to make sure that we are capturing just the mask. So now I have my, my mouse right here. I'm gonna press A. And I got a good chunk actually. It's actually bigger than, no, it's not bigger than usual. It's about 35 million polygons worth of HD polygons right there. So if I just click solo in here, that's all HD geometry right there, ready for me to sculpt, which is really cool. In the past, like old ZBrush, you would just get like little chunks of 4 million polygons. So you would just like get a tiny little circle, sometimes just one eye, you know. But look at how cool is that? You can sculpt the entire face, a part of my not so well planned ears, obviously, in a single scoop, right? So at this point here, if I do like a pore brush here, right? If I just add a little pore, look at that, it holds up, right? Not perfect, like I said. I mean, like there's a little bit of but pretty good. So at 35 million polygons, I can get a lot of detail in there, right? So like if you do like bigger detail, obviously, right? You're gonna get a bunch of like, those are gigantic pores in there. But yeah, the fact is like you have a ton of area for detail now, you know, it's like if you do anything here. And the thing that's cool too, is that it's not because it's HD that's gonna be slow to work with. Like it's pretty buttery. Although right here, let's see, like I have my, yeah, so now it's faster. So it's pretty buttery, you know, it's like you sculpt like basically like real time. Sometimes there's a tiny delay, but it's pretty much like, you know, butter. So depending on the topology, obviously, if you get something that's very, very rich and full of polygons, and there's gonna get this slower, but in general, very, very fast. So the thing is like, once you have everything in place, you did your session, you did all your HD sculpting in there, you have to get out of HD for ZBrush to be able to bake that. But if you save your scene inside of HD, it's still gonna preserve everything you did. It's just that the file is gonna be gigantic, you know? ZBrush has this thing like the files look bigger when you save in different resolutions. We can even do a test here to show you. So basically like the way it works is like this. So you sculpted all the detail. Actually, there's a trick here I can show you guys. It's just because this is just like I'm just showing like a quick test in here. But before you start any session of like sculpting inside of HD mode, the best thing to do is to actually save a morph target. And why is that? It's because although the morph target is going to be preserved just inside of the session itself, if you get out of this, the morph target is going to be lost forever, right? It's cool to have it because there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. So for example, if I save a morph target right now, right? What's going to happen is that, let's say I'm doing a lot of sculpting around, let's see, around here. So I'm doing like all those pores, right? Like after like 4 hours of sculpting pores, you're just like seeing everything like tiny little buttholes everywhere, like unicorns and buttholes. So you're seeing like all those, you know, little pores in there and everything, and you did all the sculpting. And then later on you realize, man, those pores are too tiny. I have to make them bigger. But now I'm gonna have to erase everything. How can I do that? And then you're gonna just like, oh man, I saved the morph target. So you're gonna go to the morph brush in here. And then you can just say, okay, I wanna erase them, but maybe not everything at the same time, right? I can just do put like a very small intensity and just like a little bit of erase like that. So they look a little bit less deep, right? And that's a good resource to have. And again, it's only it only is going to work during this session here. If I get out of HD, it's going to go away. But it's a great way to do it because HD geometry doesn't support layers at all, right? You can have layers outside of HD, but not inside of HD. And also HD doesn't support UVs at all. So for example, like if you try to import a displacement map and try to apply this displacement map here to deform the mesh again, it's not going to even work because it doesn't recognize the UVs when you're inside of HD. Basically, like you're locked inside of HD, right? So that's the disadvantage of HD is that you don't have access to layers, but you can get away with stuff like this with this little trick with Morph. And it's basically like you don't have access to actual textures. You cannot apply actual textures. But the great advantages, I think, for me, they are bigger than the small issues that we have with it. And the biggest one for me is to export those maps in HD, which are super fast to export. It's just a few minutes to get all the maps exported. Something that in a regular model in ZBrush, if you have like a 60 million polygons model with a bunch of UDIMs, sometimes you have to wait like 5-6 hours for all the maps to be exported. And the same model, just in HD instead of like non-HD, you can export all those maps in just a few minutes, let's say like 8-10 minutes, you know? So it's really fast. So that's why I love it so much. And also because it forces me to be better about sculpting the detail the way I should sculpt instead of like relying on, you know, it's like tweaks with layers and stuff. It's almost like a more traditional approach, you know, it's like if you did a bad job with your clay sculpture, the only way to solve it is basically like erase the detail and do it again. That's basically what I do with HD. But again, like you get a ton of detail, your model's gonna look great, like with all the, you know, super fine detail and everything is gonna look amazing at the end. So it really, I think the price is very well worth paying for. So I got all my detail sculpted in there, and let's pretend I'm super happy with it now. So I'm just gonna get out of HD now by pressing A again. And now you see like, okay, so let me just switch from Morph here to something else. So you see like now I have all this detail in here, which is like, it's a little bit, it's similar to what I had in HD before, but it's just like baked down to the non-HD model, right? So let's say if I decided at this point here to smooth some of this stuff, sometimes is a bad idea, or most of the time is a bad idea to smooth it around here. You rather go to HD again and do the smoothing in HD, because if you do the smoothing in here, look what happens. Let's just do this again. Let's get some of those partitions here and that one. So if I try to do this again in HD, those areas I just smoothed, they're gonna look a little funny. Check this out. You see, it kind of like tries to reverse what I did, and then it creates all those artifacts, you know, and then there's no way you can actually solve it. So the best way is that you enter HD, you smooth everything, or you go to the lowest resolution, or one of the lowest resolutions is the non-HD and do it, but never at the highest resolution before HD, because you end up like getting this conflict between the two ones, you know. It's one suggestion we have to write down to send to Pixelogic actually for them to solve this problem, you know. It should be, you know, corresponding between the two of them, but it's not for some reason, you know, it's like you get some weird artifacts. So in order to do this, like in the HD version, you see like, even if I crank my, my smooth here to 100, it's still hard to get rid of all this stuff, right? But if we use that smooth strong, so if you go to your brush under Lightbox, just click Lightbox brush, and you go to your smooth brush around where here, and then smooth stronger, this guy here should actually do a much better job. See, like getting rid of everything. So it really smooths things out, you know, it's like, this is the best one to use under HD. And then under HD, one thing I forgot to mention is that you still have access to the lowest levels, not like to the lowest before HD, but to the lowest in HD. So for example, I can go Shift D, or I can go to Geometry. Let's see, Geometry HD. you cannot go right there, but you can go here. So subdivision levels, 3, 2, and 1. So I have all those subdivision levels after HD, right? I have about 500,000 polys in here, right? Because I have a bunch of things that are hidden, but basically like this is the lowest before HD, the highest before HD, right? And the lowest in HD mode. So I still have access to multiple levels inside of HD, which is very useful. For example, if you have something that you want to smooth out, for example, like one of those pores in there, you still want to keep like the fine detail in them, but you want to remove, for example, the depth of them. So you can do some smoothing around here, for example, right, in a lower resolution. And then when you go back, you should be able to see the detail just a little bit more shallow in there. So you have the same control you have without HD, but just within the HD, right? Now, the test I mentioned before, let's see what happens if I save my project inside of HD at 35 million polygons. Let's see what happens here. So save as file. Let's do like a semi-HD. Let's do like semi-test HD. It's going to take a little while because it has to save all those polygons. I'm going to get out of HD now. So now I'm back to non-HD, and I'm at the highest level before HD at 1.1 million polygons. I'm going to export, I'm going to save this file again, this project. So I'm going to put like non-HD HR, high resolution. And then I'm going to go to the lowest level, and I'm going to save this file again. Non-HD, low res. Let's see what happens in terms of size of files here, okay? So if I try to open them now, look at the size of the files in here. So, oh, those ones actually, the non-HD and the HD didn't change much, right? Like the high resolution actually looks a little bit smaller than the low resolution. That's kind of interesting because in the past was different than that. And look at that, like the HD version looks smaller. That's surprising to me. In the past, yes.
Hey, I had a question, and also
Mm-hmm.
like, I actually just watched the episode in your the one where you're doing the African tribesmen.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And yeah, it was your non-HD version was like 200 megabytes smaller than
yes.
the,
yes.
the HD
you see,
version.
This is surprising, isn't it? Because it seems like they did something about it. I'm surprised that like an HD model has only 40,000 polys, 40 gigabytes.
Yeah, your African one was way bigger.
Megabytes, sorry. Yeah, it was way bigger, man. That's very surprising. I'm actually shocked. And I hope they fix that because that's pretty cool. You know, you can actually save an HD model and still have like a very low res. That's very nice. So independently of that, if I try to open any of those files, they should work all the way. So let's try with the HD first. Let's see, is this correct? No, that's the thing. Let's see, non-HD. Let's see, let's go by date in here because I think there's something else going on here. Let's see, date test HD. Okay, so that's it. I was comparing to my old one in there. No, that's correct. So you see, like the test HD we just saved. That one is 400 megabytes. That's correct now. And that's basically like when I saved inside of HD. So you see like it's a big file. And then outside of HD, it didn't change much, but it's still a little bit different here. So the high res surprisingly is a little bit lower in terms of megabytes in here than the lowest. But let's open, for example, like the test one, which is the one saved in HD. So you see like it has to load like the 70 million polygons. It's actually the loading time seems faster too. It was pretty fast. So you see, like I loaded that file I saved inside of HD, and everything is still like in the same spot, right? So if I press A outside, I should be able to get out of HD and keep working normally, right? So that file worked just fine. And if I try to do the same with the other files, like with this one that's way smaller, right? Like let's get the high res one. Way smaller, so it's like I don't know how many times, 8 times smaller, right? Almost 8 times smaller. So if I open this one, should be non-HD, But if I press, for example, a preview in here outside, all my HD detail is still there. So the tip is like, if you try to save anything, try to save outside of HD. Otherwise, your file is going to be pretty huge. You know, I thought for a second they solved it, but it was like I was trying to open the wrong file in there. That was it. But yeah, so the only thing I'm going to be doing for this weekend, obviously, I'm going to continue with my sculpting process here. Try to capture a little bit more of the his likeness as I go. And I hope you guys are doing the same on your side. I'm going to fix things like this, you know, it's like the little artifacts, like, you know, get rid of that kind of stuff, right? Like anything that I find a little funky with the eyelids in here. For example, like this line, I'm going to try to smooth it out. Get this stuff like dialed in, you know, it's like same for the ear, that little problem that I saw in there, I'm going to try to get rid of it. And then the next thing I'm going to be doing is tweaking my UVs. So I actually have, instead of like 2, I'm going to have 3 of them. And I think it's going to be more ideal. And I'm just going to ask you guys to do the same. You know, it's like, if you have any questions about the planning, just try to rewatch the video, you know, or ask in our group. And we can chime in and help with that. But the theory is that if you're using like something like my model here, that's like 70 million polygons, you should be good with between 2 and 3 UDIMs only. You know, you should not, you don't have to have more than that, unless you're wasting a lot of space. You know, it's like, for example, like instead of like using a lot of the space in here, you have everything kind of like squished in a corner. You know, it's like your UDIMs are like that, right? Then you're gonna need like a bunch of UDIMs to be able to recover all that space. But if you're using your aisles here like fairly decently, you should be able to just like have like the 2 to 3 ones to cover like about 80 million polygons. If you have like more than 80 million polygons, maybe you're gonna have to start thinking about like having a 4th one. But what I've been doing all this time during those classes is using like 5 of them, and they just revealed to be a little bit too overkill, especially considering I'm using like 8Ks, right? Like 8Ks is basically like 1 8K is 4 4Ks. So basically like in this case here, I'm using like 8 4Ks already, which is quite a bit, you know. It's like I could be using more. In that case, it would be about 12 4K maps if I use 3 here, so it's 12 4K maps, and that should be perfectly fine to reproduce like all the fine detail and everything, you know. As you can see, like in my renders, you know, when I have like close-up stuff, you can see a ton of detail, you know. It's like, so yeah, definitely think about that. Plan your UVs. There are plenty of tutorials about UVs if you're not very good with them. Maya has a bunch of awesome tools, you know. It's like I really like Maya's tools for UVs these days. In the past was a little bit more painful. And on top of that, you have not only like the modify unfold that I was using, you have a more interactive one. For example, like this tools unfold here, based on a brush, right? So you can actually just brush like that, and you can unfold things kind of interactively. But sometimes it can be a little tricky, you know. It's like I rather trust the other one, and then use this one just for a few tweaks sometimes, because if you keep like rolling over it, it keeps expanding, you know. It's like, and sometimes it, you know, it's like I'd rather do the other one, so I can actually have the whole thing being done at the same time, so it preserves the aspect ratio and everything, you know. But yeah, you guys have, you know, so you have any more questions? I mean, like we're kind of
yeah. I had a kind of a technical question and a
yes
one. So I guess the quick technical question is, you talked in your other video about like system memory, that we use a lot of, you know, heavy textures and stuff. You said kind of 32 gigs of RAM is a minimum.
Yeah.
Have you ever like opened up your task manager to see when you're rendering one of these projects how much memory you're actually eating? Because I'm kind of at the point where it's like I can order more RAM right now, but
yeah, I mean, like I never checked, but I can tell you that in terms of size, when I think I did check at some point. I believe I had like, I think like with the 5 8K maps loaded, and when you're talking about like 5 8K maps, you're not talking about just the albedo, right? We're talking about all the passes. So I had like the albedo color, I had the displacement maps, I had the
XGen.
Yeah, there's a next gen. There is also the specular and all that stuff. Everything combined, I think it was about 18 gigs total.
Okay.
Yeah, and then so that's more than obviously my 8 gigs graphics card can load. So that's why there's no way I can use like GPU render. And I think the reason I actually tried to reduce the amount of maps overall was like in hopes that, okay, once they release like the 2080 Ti, it's like actually the 3080 Ti, I was hoping they would have like more memory, but it seems like they're like 12 gigs or something.
Yeah, I think you'd have to get a Quadro if you wanted to try GPU.
Yes.
Stuff.
or have the like 2 of them, right, working
The
together.
SLI. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I hope
as for
man.
the artistic thing,
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of today I was looking up close at a bunch of the macro photos of like pores and stuff because I'm about to start that, and like literally like putting dots where all the pores are and everything.
Mm-hmm. To check the distance, right?
Yeah, and I just kind of noticed while looking through them, it's very tricky going between ZBrush and Maya with subsurface and the pictures and trying to figure out exactly how intense you should make things.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in HD geometry, do you find that it's safer to make the pores and stuff like more intense than what it may look like in the photo just because the subsurface and all that is going to reduce the effect?
Yeah, I would say like in the past we would have to do all kinds of tricks, right? Like in order to represent the pores themselves, we would have to generate like a cavity map and then kind of like shift that cavity map towards like reddish and then try to bake that within it. So in order to be able to see the pores, otherwise it would be completely washed out. But I see like with Arnold, the subsurface is so good. And if you're using the subsurface with auto bump, you actually can go and create the subsurface inside of the pore and create that little redness inside of it. So it's like quite good, it's like it's very, very nice. But in terms of the depth of it, I would say one thing I forgot to mention yesterday, it's like, I think it's an invaluable resources to have like access to those pictures of scans, right? I never bought any of those models. I actually, when someone pirated my class, the owner of the 3D scan store, he actually contacted me because he had to deal with that stuff too. And he was super nice. He offered me like to, if I needed some of those packages and stuff, and I didn't get it, but I might get, it's like at some point and say like, yeah, send me some for me to check it out. But in terms of resource, it's like when I look at those, I'm very interested in seeing like just the plain pictures without the textures or anything. Because when you see a scan, it's like there's nothing better, right? Like in the past, imagine like if you're a sculptor in the past, right? You didn't have access to something like this unless you did a cast, right? Like, but the cast back in the day wasn't, they were not that great back in the time. But in terms of this, for example, like you have a good idea about the depth of the pores, So I would say like if you can find some good scans as a reference, not only for the pores like depth or anything, but to see like how those wrinkles they are formed, it's like how they compress. Those are very, very good. It's like I think like that would be a better reference than look at any pictures because of, like you said, it's like the subsurface is gonna disguise a lot of stuff, And on top of that, for example, if you're looking at the image with the textures in it, some people have, for example, some darker circles around the eyes, like someone who's very tired and took some picturing here. And then all of a sudden, when you're trying to sculpt that, those dark areas, sometimes you can interpret as being like a deeper area than they are. And then that's why it's so interesting to look at scans. It's like I always point people to this guy on Instagram. And I think like most of the followers for him come from me saying like, follow this guy, because he doesn't have a lot of followers, which is interesting. This guy here, Joe Slock Bower, right? And he has this gigantic collection of scans. He has only like 963 followers. So this guy here, like Chris Farley, right? He has the head scan in there. And those are awesome references, because sometimes, especially with women, if you're trying to model a woman, it's really, really hard because like all the makeup and everything. And then sometimes you look at the picture without the makeup, it doesn't look anything like them, So there's like Taylor Swift right there without the makeup, right? It's like a kind of interesting, very different. And on top of that, what happens with the casts, life casts like that, or death casts, death masks, is that there is something that's you cannot trust for likeness completely. You can definitely trust like for small detail, for example, pores and things like that, right? If it's a good cast that captures all the pores and wrinkles, you can definitely trust that. But the forms themselves, you cannot trust very much, because what happens is with the weight of the material that's put like on top of the face, like with the plaster and all that stuff, it presses against the bone structure and creates a deflation. You know, it's like, so things look a little bit more deflated. So sometimes the characters look more bony than they are in real life, especially like older people like that, right? Because the skin is so thin. It compresses and then it kind of reveals all this bone structure, and it's not something you can totally trust, you know. Now there are a couple of like different techniques they use these days, especially if you're working with visual effects. For example, like you have light stage, right? Light stage, the actor sits in there and then there's a dome of lights photographing from all kinds of angles and generating a high resolution scan of that. And because it's a non-contact thing, you get like basically like a perfect likeness, you know. It's like you can trust the likeness definitely. But in terms of detail, the light stage is not able to capture as much detail, like surface detail, as a good life cast does, you know. So for example, when we did the Hulk for the first Avengers, it was a combination of both techniques. I used the light stage to create the likeness for Mark Ruffalo when I was doing the digital double. And then I used all the scan from Mark Ruffalo, like the life mask from Mark Ruffalo, to be able to capture all the details. And I transformed like, you know, some of his pores and everything. We converted into a library of alphas. And then we had all those brushes at our disposal, you know, to just, you know, we sculpt different areas and cover stuff that had some artifacts in the mask, you know. But yeah, I mean, like all of that to say that, yeah, scans are a great resource if you want to see like depth of pores and everything more than anything else, you know. So go for it and follow this guy, you know. It's like he has a great collection, especially if you're modeling, you know, celebrities and stuff.
Cool. Thank you so much. I will
No problem.
give those a look.
Yeah.
I think someone asked something in chat.
Okay, let me check. I'm so bad with the chat, man. Let's take a look here. Where's my chat? Disappeared in there. Okay, there you go. All right. I'm sculpting a full body. Would you recommend sizing down the UVs for areas that I plan to cover with clothing? Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's what we did for Kong. Kong like had very low resolution overall for the parts that are covered in hair. And then the hands, feet, and face were like super high res. But I would say I plan to cover with clothing down to 2K to 4K maps, skipping only exposed areas in 8K. Yeah, you can do that, definitely. I mean, like either you can plan them to be just like, you can use an 8K map, for example, that covers all of those spots that you're talking about, right? Instead of like multiple 2Ks and 4Ks, just spread them. Like you can put like very tiny in a corner, for example, right? So for example, if you have an 8K map, like I do here with, let's see. So my 8K map has those gaps. Where is it? Disappeared. There you go. So I have those gaps in here, right? So nothing stops you from, for example, like if you're talking about, this is going to be covered by cloth, right? So like the cloth is going to be covering this whole chunk in here. Nothing stops you from doing this. You know, it's like getting like very tiny and just putting in a corner like that inside of your 8K map. So you don't need to worry about exporting multiple maps. You know, it's like always like concerned about like, oh, I have to export this part in 2K and then this part in 4K. Because if you do that, ZBrush doesn't do selectively, right? You cannot do just like a chunk in 4K and 2K. You have to export the whole set in 2K and then the whole set in 4K. So I would say like this would be a better solution. Just like if it's a 2K, it should be equivalent to a size like this or something like that. So just like shrink it to a corner, you know, put it in a little corner there, you should be good to go.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I got a question. It's more like regarding the pipeline in the industry. That for the topology of the face, is there any specific thing that people keep in mind when they are doing retopology? Because I know they do the loops around the eyes, mouth, and then the loop that goes over the nose and around the chin. Is there anything specific that is not talked usually online, and but it's still like they keep it in mind in the industry?
Oh man, it's like I think it's very particular. You know, it's like each one of the studios have a different approach. I've seen when you look, for example, like the stuff that Weta does, right? Like they are very good at posting wireframes. So since like Gollum, I remember seeing the wireframe for Gollum. I was so impressed back in the day. I was not even in the industry yet. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool, you know? And then when I got to ILM, I remember like the guy who did the topology for our characters, we have like digital doubles. I cannot talk to specific stuff, right? Because it's part of NDAs and everything. But the stuff I'm going to be talking is just like kind of like known, you know, like articles and stuff. They already spoke about that. But the guy who actually created our base meshes is Jun Sung. And Jun Sung is he's the guy who actually sculpted Davy Jones. He's a very good artist. He's Korean, and he's an amazing guy, man. He actually planned the whole topology. But the thing is, like the topology in our case, it has to do with the way that we have the partitions created. So the partitions have to do with the UVs. So in order to get the right flow and everything, they have to be in a certain way. So for example, instead of like having a perfect loop around the eye, sometimes like the corner of the eye breaks the loop for a specific reason, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's all a matter of like, there is no like one formula for everything. The base mesh we use, it's based like it's used across the whole thing for all the digital doubles we do. So it works fairly well for everything. But if we need something more specific, for example, like for King Kong, I had to do like a very custom topology for it because we needed the folds and everything to be created without depending on the displacement. Everything had to be in the mesh. So like we had to pay attention, like, okay, so, you know, for the furrow, you know, wrinkles and everything, let's sculpt that and put into topology, you know. Yeah, there is no rule, but like I would say that the general idea is that, yeah, definitely you try to represent like the muscle structure the way that it stretches, right? So if you have like the muscles around the orbital, you know, like the eyes, right, and then around the mouth, you know that they are circular. So you're gonna need to have that so they can expand in all directions correctly. So those are like the main ones. But then when it comes like the around the eyelids, like I said, it can be very different. You know, it's like it can be like a perfect circle, or it can be something that's a little bit more broken because it can help to generate different facial expressions, like a squint or something like that. You know.
Is there any loop needed near the jaw that goes around all the way up to the forehead? Because I have seen some people are just being like very specific about it. I understand that it depends on the studio as well.
Yeah, I mean, like some people, they like to create a perfect mask, you know. It's like, so that mask that I was talking about, so for example, this loop here, instead of going behind the ear, I could shift towards the center in here and cut the mask, you know. But again, like my models are mostly like for stills, so they're not like great like for let's say like for animation at this point. But if I was planning for animation, I probably would be more concerned about like representing this area here for the forehead wrinkles more correctly, but not necessarily like, you know, it's like a perfect mask, because you have this area being covered with hair later on, you know.
Right.
And so yeah, I would say like if you follow the line of the wrinkles, I think is a better bet than try to force it to have like a perfect mask, you know.
Right. Thank you.
No problem. All right, guys, this was our first week. I mean, like we started like speeding things up a little bit yesterday, throwing a lot of information to you guys. Sometimes maybe more than I normally did like in the past classes, just to make sure that since we have the weekend coming up, and because now with the pandemic, you know, it's like a lot of people are working from home, so it's easier for us to carve some time, you know. It's like we don't have to deal with traffic at this point, like going like commuting to work. So there is a little bit more time, at least in my case, even though I'm so busy all the time, you know, with the family stuff and the full-time job and everything. And now like we are basically like not homeschooling, but we have to be in there with the kids like for a good chunk of the day, you know, it's like making sure that they are behaving. But for most of the part, most part of the time, I have more time now to actually do things, you know. So I believe you guys are going to have a little bit more time as well during the pandemic. So, you know, it's like I try to throw a lot of information to you guys that might seem a little bit fast if you're not very experienced with that. If you're very experienced, I mean, like it's not so bad. But the main thing is that you have access to the videos. You can go back and then rewatch and then see what you missed, if you missed any part. And then at least you're gonna have like ways to plan your mesh, to be able to render something with HDRI maps or with regular area lights, right? And also do some projection using ZWrap, which is an amazing tool. And then just to finish it up, let me just open my scene from yesterday and then show you what I have for my, if you saw my renders, that's an HDRI that I didn't show yesterday. I didn't demonstrate it for you, but it's one that I like a lot as well, which is this one here. It's called Kaylee Interior 4K. So this one is the one I'm using to do those renders. Let's see. This is pretty cool from Adam. Look at that. It's very, very cool. Let's see. I posted right here. Should be around there. Let's see. Yeah, right there. So this is the lighting setup in here. And because I'm using like a very forced depth of field, right? Like it's very strong to create this miniature kind of feel to it, to look like it's kind of like a small silicone mask or something. That's the feel. It's kind of cinematic, right? Because this HDRI, it has some interesting elements. It has like the light, the natural light coming from the window, but it has also some incandescent light in the environment. It's kind of like an interior light. So you get like this nice kind of cinematic kind of feel to it. So if you want to try it, you know, yeah, it's Kaylee Interior 4K from HDRI Haven. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. And
Hi.
Hi.
You have another question on the chat.
Oh, sorry. Let me check that. Where is it? Sometimes it disappears. There you go. All right. For the production, when you do inside the mouth, do you connect the topology of the gums inside of the mouth or just separate meshes? Well, for my personal work, I keep things separate, right? But in production, yeah, everything is attached. So the gums are part of the inside of the mouth and the teeth is separate. I mean, it's an option, right? Like, but yeah, that's the way we do it. I mean, like for personal work, since I'm not animating, if I just have like the arc in there with a teeth attached to it, I mean, I can just move it around more easily, right? If you have something that's completely attached to the topology, then it's a little bit harder because you have to select and soft select and move stuff around. So it becomes a little bit harder. That's why we have all the partitions and everything to make sure that the selections happen a little bit easier. But yeah, I have separate for sure. All right, guys, you have a great weekend, and I hope to see more of your work either during the weekend or next week. And then next week is gonna be like kind of hardcore because you're gonna be working with the pores and adding some wrinkles and all that fun stuff. And that's like it sounds simpler than it actually is. And you saw, if you are following like the group, you know, the posts, the comments that I'm making, the posts, you know, it's like it's easy to think about like, okay, pores is just like you're gonna place them in there and it's just gonna work straight away. It's so tricky, man, because there is something about the right distance between them, the right depth for them. If you start doing it wrong and you cover the entire face with the wrong size and proportion, at the end of the day, it doesn't sell as real skin. You know, it's like you cannot see as real skin. It looks a little artificial or very artificial sometimes. So when we talk about this next week, I'm going to be explaining and try to be very clear about, you know, it's like, let's make sure that the distance between them, it's kind of like it's a little bit more even across the board for the entire face. It's going to be a little bit more spread out in certain areas that have more stretch, for example, the cheeks and, you know, it's like forehead, things like that. But overall, they shouldn't be like gigantic in the forehead and very super tiny around the muzzle area. You know, it's like should be fairly similar and just like more stretched in certain areas. But yeah, we're going to talk about this the next week. Guys, have a great one, and I see you soon.
Thank you, Heaven.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.